What is up, Honey Badger Nation? Welcome to another episode of Expert Mentors Live. You guys are in for a treat today. This gentleman has we're coming up on 2 years. I think.
I think it's right.
Is our time working together, and
feels more like 10, don't you think?
It does. I've aged tremendously during this time.
It's a good 2 years.
It has been fantastic, and I was working with Jack and Michael Perry out of Utah. They're number one. Number one. They were KW and then short stint at EXP. They're at Real, but the Perry Group is one of the largest groups in the state of Utah. For residential real estate, and Jack is just an incredible human being, and getting to know him and his backstory, and I was out there doing a deep dive. They took me up to Park City.
Cool.
Kind of out, and we had just 2 days deep dive strategy session, and when you're in that creative vulnerability space, right? Just conversations come up, and we were talking about, Michael just getting married, and he was going through with his wife. They were working with you. And then he told me the story and introduced, and he said, check it out. You got to check it out. And immediately. And then I reached out to you immediately, and we've been pretty consistent a couple times every month since.
Oh, it's awesome.
I think I every time I see Jack or Michael, I always thank them for the introduction. And I've had a lot of great mentors and coaches and influences in my life. I will say, you have probably been, for me as a human, probably one of the most instrumental people that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. So it's I'm excited.
You, John. That's an honor. That's an honor, man. And it's so fun coaching with coaches, because it's a different game, because it's so funny to watch you take notes and then to watch you go implement. It's such a breath of fresh air. So I'm honored too, John. I love being with you guys.
And, so like about a year ago, I think we had you just on the regular Coach Code podcast. And I still have my notes from right here. I reference back on a consistent basis. Awesome. A lot of the tools and actual frameworks that you give really, can be applied immediately, right? That create those distinctions that you can start to see immediate results. And, working in the one-on-one space, coaching residential real estate agents for over a decade now, I've seen it all. I've seen the highs of the highs. I've seen the lows of the lows. And, one of the biggest things that typically I've noticed, and if you just want to break it down into kind of health, wealth and relationships, there's pinnacles, and I can always tell most of the time, agents are rocking, but I can tell, kind of like I like to call, layers deeper. Something else is going on underlying the surface that maybe they're not being authentic or genuine or open about at the vulnerability just yet. And typically you can see it, right? The health is suffering, but a lot of the times it's the underlying issues of the relationships. And before I kind of let you kind of dive in, I know specifically some key points that we want to hit on today. One of the things as the real estate industry has kind of transitioned over the last, 9, 10, 12 months with, inventory levels, interest rates, just the internal changes within the industry. It's changed the dynamic, because a good run, mid 20, 21, half part of 22, the industry forced the behavior of real estate agents to become very reactive. Being really good at order taking, being really good at multitasking fast. And things have kind of transitioned, because what I see, a lot of real estate agents are not good business entrepreneurs, and understanding the financials and the dynamics. And so now, as those things have shifted, if they have not adopted the behavior required to be successful day in and day out, you know, the financial burden, and, you know, there's always a handful of things that really impact relationships, and especially if you don't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
And so the big thing that you know, it's a mantra that I've always kind of said and kind of coached on is like, guys, there are no business problems. There's just leadership problems. And how are you leading yourself at a high level? And one of the things, Matt, that I've seen is that they just don't have the tools to be able to truly coach and lead themselves, and then pour into the relationships with their team members, relationships with their kids, the relationships with their significant others. And then that becomes all consuming. And as we all know, the biggest constraint that we all have is the constraint on our attention. And so that just magnifies, and it really puts them in a state of just freeze, right? Just they're paralyzed. They've got the concrete boots on and they don't know what to do. And I just believe they don't have you. They don't have you in their life to help them work through the things that they so easily could work through if they just knew how.
Yeah. How or what, right? The what. By the way, one of the things that I'm a big proponent of is so, because again, I worked with Franklin Covey and I worked with Stephen Covey and got to sit in meetings with him and help write books with him, and kind of a leadership guru, right? The big deal guru. And what I came to my conclusion is, so leadership is all, and you just use the two words almost synonymously. Leadership is relationship. It's the most important thing on this earth will be your relationship. And it will be with yourself, with others, with your higher power, if you believe in that, with earth, with Mother Nature, with just goodness. So it's there, but to me, there's a hidden value that we find in this relationship. I call the relationship the space between, right? And so and it's hard because like we can teach leadership, and we can send people to academies, and we can give them ranks and give them structure and order and educate. But what we're really talking about, that I think is the key to any endeavor, and by the way, just to pure healthy life, is your ability to be in the space with other humans and turn it into something powerful or magical. Or if we just make it very simple, to just make it additive, right? Or what we could do is make it emergent. So there's a concept called an emergent property. And an emergent property is something that doesn't exist in one agent, and it doesn't exist in another agent or another buyer, let's say. But when one agent really works well with a buyer in the space between, something new emerges. And that something new is like a synergy that didn't exist before they got together. And it didn't exist with every other agent that doesn't know how to create something in that space with another human. And the irony is that emergent property is a new property that is created by us being able to do certain things with people. Listen and communicate, have enough character to hear it and not react, to be cooperative and to help kind of create the synergy, to be willing to change and adapt. It's a really powerful thing that I think we're going to talk about here. And I think most of us look past it because we all have been doing relationships our whole life, right? We think we know them, and we know we're not perfect in relationships. But my real belief is, in a market like ours that's that's constantly changing, it's your only competitive advantage. Every other agent out there can buy every other system, take every other class, read every other book, even go to the same coaching that everyone goes to, right? But the difference is, can you do it? Can you, in the space with another person, create something new? And sometimes, by the way, that something new may not be a sell in that moment, right? It might just be trust. What emerges is maybe trust. Or another thing that might emerge is understanding. And another thing that might emerge is benefit. And another thing that might emerge is growth. By the way, if you notice, trust, understanding, benefit, and growth, a lot of those are all kind of hard to measure, but they're all critical to creating true lasting power with humans. We have to have shared trust, mutual trust. We have to have mutual understanding. We have to have mutual benefit, and we have to have mutual growth. And so as we talk today, what I'm going to try to do is hopefully at least look at some things that we think we know. And then I just want you to look maybe 1 mile further down. And because if you look a little bit further, you might see a deeper point that you don't even know is really at the root or the core of what creates the relationship. So relationship is leadership. And when you're really good at relating, you can be really good at leading. And the more you can relate to yourself, weirdly, and the more you are self-aware, the more you can relate to everyone else. If you've ever met somebody that was not very self-aware, man, they're hard to deal with. And they don't read you very well. But if you are really self-aware, then it actually helps me understand you better, because that which is most personal is most universal, is what Carl Jung used to teach, right? So whatever you feel most personally in your heart are the universal facts of life. Everybody's a little afraid. Everybody's a little insecure. Everybody's a little inadequate. Everybody's a little ignorant. And when you feel any of those feelings, then you've just touched humanity. Now you're normal. And so that's kind of where we can start with every human being, is that which is most personal are the universal things of life.
So, Matt, and we talked about this. This was one of the questions on the last podcast that we were on, and I asked you 2 most important things, moving forward, and you said some type of mindfulness and emotional intelligence. And so self-awareness is being one of those core tenets of emotional intelligence. What causes the blind spot for humans and leaders to not have that level of self-awareness? Where does that blind spot, and how can you create that awareness so then now they can do something about it?
It's such a good thing. So one thing that causes the blind spot, if you think about it, is just pure nature, right? So human beings, we weren't necessarily wired to sit, and we didn't necessarily evolve to sit and worry about what we want to be someday, right? Our job was always to worry about the proximate threat in the immediate moment. That was generally what humans were supposed to do, is we were supposed to worry about the mountain lion coming down the mountain to get us. And I don't know if we talked about this on your last show, but which is one of the problems that we're having, I think, in today's day and age. One of the reasons anxiety is going up, one of the reasons attention is dropping, is because we now live in a world that we actually hadn't evolved to live in. We're now living in a world that will, and it takes apparently 70,000 years to evolve a trait in something, right? So it takes a lot of birth and death and birth and death and birth and death and creation and death to create a trait, 70,000 years. So in about 70,000 years, we'll be ready. We will have evolved to handle what we're doing right now. And that's not a good sign. So a lot of what we're battling, I think, is just pure nature, number one. We talked about a story. I can't remember if I talked about it last time, but the bombing in Boston, the Boston Marathon bombing, when that bomb went off, anybody that night that then watched 5 hours of coverage of the Boston Marathon bombing was more likely to suffer signs and feelings of PTSD than people that were on the ground during the Boston Marathon bombing. Because when we watch TV about a tragedy we have no control over, it just induces anxiety. There's nothing you could do in your lazy boy chair and recliner to do anything about that bombing, but you people still subjected themselves to 5 hours of watching it. And that, by the way, induces anxiety. So one of our problems as humans is just human nature and how we're wired to be. And part of that nature is we should be dealing with the proximal issues, the issues closest to us. We should be dealing and worrying and thinking and energizing the issues that are in our circle of influence and control. And the minute you look beyond that, you have effectively missed the mark. And when you've missed the mark, you will suffer for it. Like, how many times has an agent said, all you need to do is 100 calls a day, just 100 calls a day, just do your calls or whatever you're supposed to do. And every one of them looks beyond it, because this is the thing we don't necessarily want to deal with. And so that's one thing. Another thing that is part of this, is kind of part of human nature, is we have a serious bias toward tangible instead of intangible things. And this is huge. So a really fun activity for everybody watching. In fact, let's just give everybody time to do this. Get out a piece of paper, and I want you to write down 5 things that you want to get out of your real estate business. What are 5 things on your team you must have? They're the must-haves. Okay. And if you could only have 5, what are those 5 things? And I want everybody to take a second and write down what their 5 things are. You can have anything you want. You want money? Put money. You want loyalty? Put loyalty. You want respect? Put respect. If you want excellence, put excellence. Okay, so take a second and write those things down.
Okay.
Now, go down the list, and I want you to put a T next to everything on the list that's tangible. So if it's tangible, you should be able to do this to it. Okay? And I want you to put an I next to everything on the list that's intangible. An intangible would be something you can't touch. It's something you just kind of feel. So go down that list and see what comes up.
Would money be tangible?
Now, it's interesting. Do you want, if you even think about money, for example, do you want a specific amount of money? Is $5 enough?
Right.
And so do you want $100,000? Do you want $1 million? Or another question you could ask yourself about the money is the money, what's it going to provide you? And a lot of times when you ask that question, what's it going to provide you? You'll usually get to something like, well, security. So a lot of times we want security, and money's just an interesting word. You could also have just said cash, but then you'd still need to quantify the cash. Why that's important to notice is that the minute you start to add description to the word, it becomes less and less. It could become more and more tangible. But like, I want $1 million cash. That's very tangible. But then you might be like, or should I say 2? Or should I say 3? So if everybody goes down their list, and if we were sitting in a room with everyone in the room, and I asked how many of you have the majority of the things on your list being intangible, it would pretty much be everyone in the room.
Right.
Everyone in the room, which is so important, right? Because what that tells us is the number one thing that all of us most want to have tend to be intangible. And this is the problem. Because you go to work at your real estate office, which is very tangible, and you have a meeting with your tangible coworkers, and you have a tangible listing, and you have a tangible sale, and you have a tangible client that you're trying to sell, and but you walk in the room, when they walk in and they see the baby room, and they are in love with that room, because that's where they're going to raise their baby. What you're actually invoking is the intangible.
Yeah.
And so the key to human relationships, amazingly, once our basic needs are met, which they are mostly met in our Western world, that's why all of us go to intangible. Now, if I went to another country, third world country, and we talked about this, they wouldn't necessarily want all your intangibles. What they would want is a mosquito net, because that would make the business. And what they would want is a car, because that would change everything. And so why that's super important is when you live in the Western world and you're trying to get anything done with human beings, you must pay attention to the intangible. And one of the natures of humans is we don't notice the intangibles as much as the intangible. We want the boyfriend or the girlfriend, but the intangibles is really what we see: connection, love, validation, safety, trust, appreciation. And so we want to have a healthy, strong, peaceful team, but we don't necessarily know how to get there. And so one of the things I think that's a key to leadership that we're going to want to talk about today is, how do you get the intangible when it's seemingly so counter? It's actually not counter human nature. It is human nature, but you can't just focus on the tangibles. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the tools or the thought process to go there?
There's one of my favorite quotes of all time is a quote by Albert Einstein that says, you cannot attempt to solve a problem you created at the same level of thinking you were at when you created it, right? So one of the reasons this is hard is because we keep looking for it in its tangible form. So one of the things that I teach really early in pretty much any of my programs, and in fact, let's see if this will work. I always teach, and so this is one of my favorite tools to get to the intangible. Let's just pretend like that's smoke, and underneath the smoke, there's a fire, okay? So when you're sitting there talking to an agent or talking to a client, and the client is giving you all this lip service about, well, the carpets are going to have to come out. And in fact, it's really funny right now, I'm looking to buy a building. And we just went and looked at it. And it's so amazing how this all works. So we show up. I went and looked at it earlier in the day. It was awesome, quiet, beautiful location. Everything's beautiful. Show up at night, and all I hear is this music. And I did not know, but the building next to ours is like a workout studio, and they are just rocking. And but it was later, it was 7:30 at night. And so I'm sitting there thinking, well, what? How does anybody just do that? Like, that doesn't seem right. You can't just rock out. But the entire time my wife was with me, and she's like, well, we can't have that. Like, we have people, we have classes, we have all this stuff going on. We can't have that. She could not stop thinking about it. And our son-in-law is representing us as our agent on it. And he's like, oh, no problem. We'll take care of it. I mean, I'm sure the HOA has rules about this, and we can still do a lot of construction to quiet it down, and then we can negotiate with them to do it at different times. But my wife, it kind of ruined the rest of the night for her. Now, what was the problem? I guess it was tangible sound. But so we could get caught up in the sound of it all. But I think what was really getting her is she thought that was disrespectful. Like, that's rude. Like, we don't want to be next to a person that's going to be rude. Right. By the way, I'm sure the owners weren't even thinking of us, because it was an abandoned, and not abandoned, but an empty building. So when we get into the smoke is everything that we fight about that's not the real issue. So it could be the carpets, the sound. It could be what your coworker said to you that was so rude. It could be how much money. How come I only got 1.5% instead of my 3%? Like, I want my 3%. Like, what percentages are you taking? And then you might have your battle with your broker, or you might be the broker that has the battle with the people, or it might be the overall just real estate in general, or it might be inventory. Oh my gosh. Inventory right now is changing everything. This is just, and people just get devastated, right? And the minute we get into that, we start creating what I call a ton of smoke. And the smoke starts to envelop us. And where I've lived this so strongly in my life is I was a mediator for divorcing couples. I thought that would be fun. I left Franklin Covey to go help people divorce. It was so awesome. But it was super, it's because I wanted the skills. I wanted to know how to sit with people in high conflict. and I learned.
Yeah, you learned.
But I learned totally, but everybody gets really messed up in this smoke. And I would watch couples fight about smoke, and you would just see it churning in the room. And I used to be an EMT when I was going through college. I was an EMT on an ambulance. So I learned a lot about like emergency medicine and stuff like that. And one of the things I remember as I'd work with the fire department, they'd always tell me that very few people actually burn to death, right? If they're going to die in a fire, most of them aren't even burnt. They're just dead from smoke inhalation. So as I was mediating, I would notice all this smoke hitting, and most of it wasn't even real. And most of it didn't even matter. It's just our mind going crazy. And it would fill the room, and everyone would start to feel suffocated. And when some people feel suffocated, they start fanning. They start fanning the smoke. And when you give oxygen to fire, it ain't pretty. And some wouldn't fan it anymore. They would just get up and they'd leave. So I started to realize that in the smoke, the longer you're sitting there fighting about supposed tangibles that aren't real, you're dead. So the sooner you jump out of the smoke and get down to the actual fire, you start to create the change. So this is to me, the number one key and tool to get to more of the intangibles in everything that you'll see. And by the way, when you see the smoke with people, there's 3 signs that are going to show you it's happening. There's 3 things that happen every time in a relationship. And anytime you see these signs, I need you to pay attention. Because once you pay attention, I call them, by the way, vital signs. Vital signs, because when I was an EMT, we'd show up in an ambulance and we'd have a bunch of tools to get you help. But the minute I got there, I wouldn't know what help you needed until I checked 3 signs, right? I needed to check your heart, your breathing, your circulation. I needed to make sure your vitals were stable. Here's 3 vitals that show you that the relationship is healthy and you can proceed normally. If you don't see these signs, stop what you're doing and get down to the fire. Sign number 1, anytime you see negative emotion in a relationship going up, I want you to pay attention to it. Going up simply means anytime I see anger, quiet, sad, detached, anytime. So think of the people that you deal with that are the hardest to get results with. Anytime you see a negative emotion in them, because the cool thing about emotion, emotion comes from the Latin word emo vere, and emo vere means to move. It means emotion, but in the word emo vere, if you notice, is the word move. Every emotion is designed to move you. It's designed to move you. So if I see an emotion, then I know deep in that person's heart, that emotion is trying to make something happen. If they're sad, they're probably trying to have me drawn to them. By the way, if they walk away and are sad, they're trying to probably and they let me know they're sad and they walk away, they might want me to follow. If I follow them and corner them and they're like, get out of here. Now the emotion's anger. So now they're trying to push me away. If you see a lot of confusion, so the second sign I look for is understanding going down. So the simple rule is whenever emotion goes up, you'll almost always see understanding go down, period. Almost every time someone's mad, angry, quiet, alone, peeved, ticked, irked, whatever they do emotionally, when it goes up, understanding drops. So if it gets more and more confusing in a meeting, if you see more and more anger between agents, if you are getting more fed up and feeling more anger about what your broker is saying, then you probably have a fire issue. Quit fighting about the money or the split and start recognizing that there's a deeper issue. And I'll show you 7 issues that are the core intangibles that really In the end, they're the things that have to be met. And if they're not, it triggers everything on earth. So if I see negative emotion, that's a sign. If I see understanding dropping, that's a sign. Anytime the deal gets more and more confusing is a time to start listening. Quit solving it. Quit bucking it. Quit trying to argue against it. When you see confusion, sit back, notice it, and understand what's going on. Start trying to listen. Third thing is trust. Almost any time you see emotion up and understanding down, you're going to usually see trust go down, right? So if you see trust dropping, which means now they're not returning your phone call. Now they're not into the deal as much. Now they're not giving you a straight answer. Then you can bet there's an issue that's the fire.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So when I see these signs, and I always have to use acronyms so I remember everything. Anytime I see someone going nuts, I know we got to stop. I got to stop pushing what I'm pushing, and I need to start getting down to the deeper issue,
which is
more of the intangible. Does that make sense?
Get down to the fire.
Yeah. And I'll show you. The fire is very basic emotion that they're just human needs that have to be met. And when the human needs aren't met, it automatically, we learned as a baby, it turns on our fight or flight. And so once fight or flight is turned on, it makes it so everything's more complicated. Everything's more confusing. And you'll see this this is universal to all human relations. You go to a restaurant and the server's like, "Hi, welcome to Applebee's. What can I get you?" You can see negative emotion. She's not having a great day. It ain't good. And you don't have to pay attention to it. But if you want to have power in the space with somebody, I'd pay attention to it. Because she cannot not communicate it. And if you get good at picking it up, then I don't know that I'd say something. Like I might not say, whoa, someone pooped in your Cheerios. I probably wouldn't go there. Because by the way, just me saying that, can you predict, will that make her more angry or less angry?
Right. But this goes back to the beginning, and every relationship is an opportunity to add to or emerge something new.
Yeah, this is that emergent property.
That negative emotion is up. Yeah. This gives us an opportunity to emerge something new.
And if you notice where these cues, these vital signs live, they don't live just in her, they're living in the space between us. She's showing them, and now they're just floating right in front of me. And then I can look at them and try to perceive what they mean. And I can show, hey, you seem a little tired. I could say something like that. And do you want to bet $1,000 that behind that emotion that I just recognized is a story? Oh my heck, this is my second shift. I've been here 2 shifts. And I don't know if you just heard, I just dropped a whole tray of plates. So all of this money right now that I'm going to make for the next 3 hours, none of it matters because I got to pay for all that food. What the crap am I doing here? And then just watch how interesting. Well, too bad for you. I'd like a hamburger and then I go order. But now if I can let what's happened to her, oh my heck. So you've been working all day and now the money's not going to be there for you. So you're discouraged. Guess what she'd say? Yeah. And I could be home with my kids. And then she'll tell you more. And if she tells you more, guess what happens? Her emotion comes down and my understanding goes up. Now I get it. She's now working for nothing. Now I can then say, well, let me just let you in on a secret. This table is the best tipping table you'll ever meet. And because you were willing to share that with us, we're going to do what we can to give you a good tip. So we'll get you some extra money. And that might build trust, right? But no matter what it is, it built humanity. And then it just made me better at just reading people. And then what it also does weirdly is it confirms with this woman that humanity's good, that there are people that care. And even if my tip, hey, I'm instead of tipping 5%, I'm going to go a full 10. I'm going to tip her 10%. Or I could go crazy. What if I went the full 20 that I really should? Or what if I went even to 30%? And now all of a sudden, I feel good giving 30%. How many times have you not felt good giving 30%? How many times have you not felt good giving 20% because they didn't even earn it? But man, I'd give 30 or 40% for this woman or more.
Right.
And now something just emerged that was really powerful for both of us. So that doesn't exist if you don't pay attention to the signs. And so instead of getting caught, by the way, we could get caught up on the policy at Applebee's about plate dropping. Well, that's a ridiculous policy. Where's your manager? I'm going to talk to the manager about the policy. It has nothing to do with the policy. It has to do with one human being suffering. By the way, and it sounds like her family is really important to her.
Yeah.
And it sounds like she's sacrificing to be here for her family. That might even be a really great thing to ask her. Tell me more about your family. How many kids do you have? What's going on? Oh, we just adopted the cutest baby, blah, blah, blah. Powerful.
Right.
That's human power. And that's what I mean when we talk about something that emerges. I never walked into that restaurant thinking this would happen. And it doesn't, I don't even need to take a picture of it and put it on Instagram for everyone to see. Hey, I tipped her 40%. I don't need to do that. Yeah. But what I do know is I just had a real connection to another human being. And I know her name is Tanya. And I know she has 2 kids and she just adopted one of them. And that kid is now home with dad, probably dying because of dad's not paying attention. And I might know a lot of stuff about her. So the cool thing about this, and it gets into this concept, before I teach you what the 7 needs are, it gets into this concept that's called micro moments. Have I ever talked to you about micro moments, John?
No, not at all.
So there's really awesome research out there right now that talks about the fact that to be really happy in life, you don't need to do a lot of big things to be happy. What you need are what are called consistent doses or micro moments of positivity. Okay. And here's what a micro moment is. Okay. It's a brief moment of positivity that are repeated senses of positive feeling throughout the day. And they provide a buffer against stress, depression, and they improve both your physical and your mental health. They are the key to improving long-term well-being. So what they're finding out is if you, for example, get on an elevator and somebody is using a walker to get on, and you hold the door and take a second to hold the door for them, which you'll do because you're a nice person, and they get on and you have an interaction with them. And like they have tennis balls on their little legs of their walker. And you're like, oh, are you a tennis player? And you just see little tennis balls, and they look up at you from their walker and they laugh and you laugh, and they're like, nope, I just use them on my walker. Well, you couldn't have picked a better sport. And then we have just a brief moment of interaction. That moment, if it just lasts 8 seconds, makes you feel better and it makes them feel better. And the research on happiness shows that these micro moments, having 10 of those a day or 20 of those a day, are what make you happy. It wasn't even the closing that you had that day that makes the day. The irony of the closing that makes the day is the 10 seconds that you had the emotional charge from it. That was what made it. And then you might even get another charge when the check comes in, right? Like, oh, there it is. And you might get another charge going to tell your boss about it. But when all of a sudden throughout the day, you're starting to stream together these micro moments of being positive in the moment, being present, your day is better. And you know what else is cool? Because humans, we're wired to, we're wired to pair and share with people. So humans have these, what are they called? Mirror neurons. And the mirror neurons make it so that when you tell me a funny story, my brain goes where your brain is, and we both feel we're paired, and now we share a chemical hit. And that's why when you see somebody laughing, you start laughing more. And when you see someone crying at a funeral, you're more likely to cry because you're paired to them. And humans do this pretty naturally. And the cool thing about it is that's the beginning of empathy, by the way, right? So you already know when you walk into a house, if you've listened to the couple, you already know what their intangibles are.
Yeah.
That's why when I'm interviewing a couple, I would figure out what their intangibles are. What is it you want the home for? I want peace. I want to be able to walk in my house and feel peace. I want to sit on my deck and have my coffee and just feel peace. Okay. So then when you're looking for a house, you better be looking for a house with peace.
Yeah. Help create.
And you might even want to notice when you walk in the house, the parts of the house that may not bring peace. Right. And so if all of a sudden you're cued into their intangibles, which is why it'd be powerful to ask them, what is it you really seek? So if I had a magic wand, you've all done this, I'm sure. If I had a magic wand, Stacy, and we can get you any house you wanted, you always, I mean, it's easy. How many rooms, how many bathrooms, how many car garage, what do you want? Split level, you'll get into all that. By the way, notice very tangible, very tangible. But what I would also do is, what are you going to use the bedrooms for? And what are you hoping to have in those rooms? Like, what's the feeling? I would get to some intangible and then I'd listen very carefully to the words they bring up, because the words they bring up are cueing you in to how to set the emotional conditions when you get there. Another thing one thing to remember, these micro moments are really all you're after. And if you're going to go visit 4 homes with a couple, you probably ought to find a way to have 10 of them in that hour and a half or that 2-hour period. If we could have 10 micro moments, that's pretty powerful.
So powerful.
And by the way, you'd have a really good day. If you leave having had 10 micro moments with somebody, and what if you just made it a point to have the micro moments everywhere you go, you want one. When you go in the store, you're going to go find one moment and all you have to bring, weirdly, is positivity, presence. You got to be in the moment. And then another thing that helps is a little charity. Look out for someone else's need. Positivity, presence, and charity. The word they use for presence is synchrony. So if you bring positivity, synchrony, and charity, you're going to create micro moments all the time. And by the way, you can create them anywhere. You can create them at a funeral. You can create them in an emergency room. You can create them in trauma. You can create them when they didn't get the deal because they offered too little. You can create them all the time. And that's all you're doing there, really, if you think about it. Notice the words positivity, synchrony, presence, and charity. Those tend to be intangibles, but those are really kind of strong governing intangibles.
Right.
So I'd bring them to every deal you've got, every moment you've got.
I love it. I love it. So Matt, getting down to, putting the fire out, which you said really comes around the human needs, and something's off, right?
Yeah.
That's what's causing the fire and where the smoke will come from. So how do we really put the fire out?
Yeah. First key is to know what the intangibles are, know what the needs are, right? So no matter how different we all try to be, we're still, honestly, as just humans, 98.5% the same. We're all pretty much the same, right? There's really very little different about us. But the difference is, so what I always like to focus on first, humans, again, this is kind of a natural human issue, is we tend to focus on where we diverge instead of where we converge. And so we always seek the divergent point, or what we call the negative interpretation, or we always seek the thing that is not as unifying. so as to hopefully always protect against that to bring us safety. But what I like to always do is shore up first where we're together. And these are the 7 needs where we're together. Okay, let's go through them. And once you see the need, you'll see, okay, that's pretty much all human need. Basic need number 1 is safety. Everyone on earth needs to feel safe. If you don't feel safe, it changes how I work with my real estate agent, right? And so safety to me is 5 things. I've got to feel physically safe, so I'm not going to be harmed. If they're sitting there talking about, well, that looks like that tree's going to fall in the backyard, you can just roll your eyes and say, what a flippin' idiot. Like, okay, we'll get the tree fixed. Jeez. But the tree is just the smoke. What she's bringing up is safety. That's a safety issue. And I'd even say that, wow, Stacy, so that tree feels unsafe to you. Yeah, like that could fall right on our house. The husband might be like, don't worry, she's neurotic. It's not an issue. He'll just smile and say, okay, but you'll still understand the issue. So first need is physical safety. Another type of safety is social safety. Don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass me. If you've ever seen a wife throw the husband under the bus because he can't qualify for more money on the house, and the man is like, I could qualify for more. I just have a budget and I don't want to lose the budget. And they start fighting about the budget money. That's a safety issue for his social ability. The next emotion is safety is an emotional safety. Do I feel emotionally safe with you to tell you what I really want? Do I feel like I can share my real dreams and goals with you?
Yeah.
The third need is financial safety. Do we have enough money? And the fourth need is what I just call spiritual safety, which is, do we have the same value system? So if you're going to work with clients, they need to feel safe with you. And the goal would be to make sure that they're physically safe. So if you're going to drive them around, you may always say, hey, if you want, I'll drive you. If you feel more comfortable driving yourself, you can just follow me. And that's you taking care of their safety need, right? And so safety is anytime, and if you go back to the smoke, when we're fighting about the split with the broker, what you can bet is the split, if it doesn't seem right, then you could just sit there and know that it's probably a safety issue for this person. And if I was talking to them about the split, I would quit trying to justify it. And what I might do is step back and get into them because I'm seeing negative emotion. And I might say, hey, I can see the split really is upsetting you. It makes you feel like, it sounds like you don't feel safe financially with our approach. Tell me more about that. And then make them address their safety issue and see if they can give you more. And what they'll usually do is give you a little more information. Well, my last broker was doing all these weird splits too. And I hated it because I didn't know what I was getting when, and it was driving me crazy. And there's just history. And that's super good for you to know if you want to get rid of the smoke on this thing, right? Or you can just say, well, that's just how we do it. It's just who we are. Sorry, deal with it. But whatever it is, if this person has a safety issue with you, it doesn't mean they won't work for you. It just means you're going to always be battling their safety issue. And one thing to remember is just because there's a safety issue doesn't mean it's your fault. A lot of us bring our safety issues with us, right? A lot of us have not lived a very safe life. And so we have a lot of fears. So safety is the first basic need. Second need is trust. If I want to be with you and have you as my realtor, I've got to trust you. For me to trust you, there's 2 things I always need to trust. I need to trust your character so I know you're honest and decent. You're not going to lie to me. Right. And you're not going to tell me something untrue. And I also need to trust that you're competent, meaning you know what you're doing. You're a competent, skilled agent that can get, if I buy this property, I need to know that my son-in-law can get that music turned off. Yeah. Or at least down enough that it doesn't ruin my business. Right. And I also want a good relationship with them. So I don't want them to do it in a way that they never can talk to me again. Right. So this is what's so powerful about these needs. Think about it. If I don't feel safe with you and I don't trust you, how do I talk to you about what I want in real estate? Right. I'm going to tiptoe around you. and I'm not going to open up. How do I negotiate? And you've all done this. Have you ever tried to negotiate with a bear that is just a brute?
Oh yeah.
And if you don't feel safe, you may know deep in your heart, you don't negotiate well when you're not safe. You get more pissy, you get more mean. And so these are needs that you can't just keep playing the game if these two things are not in play, because it will impact everything. How do you talk to somebody you don't trust? You don't.
No.
How do you work with a coworker you don't trust?
You don't.
You don't. So notice that is a weird, intangible. And by the way, how do you know you're safe? I feel it. How do you know you trust somebody? I feel it. And this is why we don't pay attention to it. But it is the operating principle, because when these needs aren't met, boom, fight or flight turns on.
Fire.
And humans are wired to protect.
Awesome.
So safety and trust, two basic needs. Third need is appreciation. Everybody wants to be appreciated differently. Everybody wants to know that their value is appreciating. We don't want to be depreciating in value. We want to be appreciating in value. And this kind of gets into, if you've ever read, like in a relationship, the 5 love languages stuff. Everyone wants to be loved differently. I use a little different approach where I say that everybody wants, I use a different sense to know I'm loved. I like to hear I'm loved. So when my wife tells me she loves me or touches me, those are 2 senses I prefer to get my love through. My wife feels more loved when she sees me vacuuming, okay, in like a maid outfit. It's not even a French maid outfit. It's like a Courtyard Marriott janitor outfit with grease all over it. I don't know, but it's tight. She likes it. So so she's a seer. And some of us aren't seers or hearers or touchers, we're sensors. So we sense we matter because they give us time and attention, right? And so think of how the people around you and the people you're working with, think of how they feel most appreciated. Some of them want to have you answer the phone. Answer the phone. And you'll know who they are because they will tell you, you never answer your phone.
Right.
That's somebody that's crying for appreciation by hearing it. Some of them, just all they need to see it is, so a really nice little text is all they need. Some are sensors. They want your time, or they want that when you're with them, that they have your attention. And so what you'll really want to try to figure out is, how do the people that I'm trying to get close to really want to be connected? How do they feel most appreciated? And generally you could ask something like, what are the best agents you've ever worked with before? What did they do that were so successful? Because I want to be that successful for you. And you know what? They just answered the calls. They got us a good deal. They were honest. I'd take really good notes, right? And that's just a simple question. Safety, trust, appreciation. R stands for respect. Do you feel like the people around you respect you? Do they listen to your opinions? Do your opinions matter? You might have clients that don't feel like you respect them. And how do you think of this? How do you communicate with somebody that you don't think respects you? You probably, by the way, you might talk too much. You might oversell yourself.
Right.
You might overgame it. You might give away the secrets, right? You might go overboard. And so think of that. Safety, trust, appreciation, and respect, universal needs. In fact, there's a really cool pattern that you see a lot with male, female. A lot of times when a female, for example, feels unsafe, she'll feel fear. And when she feels fear, a lot of times she's going to say something about it. And when she says something, the man might feel more shame. Like, oh, you think I'm an idiot? Like, what, you think I can't handle it? Like, whatever. And when he feels shame, he a lot of times creates more fear. So there's a pattern, and it doesn't just have to be male, female, but it's a pattern between fear and shame, fear and shame, fear and shame. And a lot of fights that you'll see is the fear of someone else has them say something rude. And when you hear the rude, you feel shamed And when you're shamed, you make them afraid, and it starts creating a crazy pattern. Does that make sense, John?
It does.
You don't ever see that with agents, do you?
All the time.
Isn't it
All the
fast?
time.
And isn't it fascinating how fast it can spin too? How it just
Yeah.
starts spinning out of control.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And that's, I mean, those flames are lit when that happens.
Game on, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That next need is validation. Everybody needs to know that they're valid. It doesn't mean, by the way, you have to agree with somebody. You don't have to agree with someone to validate them. In fact, I actually think agreeing with them is the cheapest way to validate someone. Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. Don't agree. You don't have to agree. What you have to do is just get curious. When you say this and this and this, or whatever party is the worst party, tell me what you mean by that. Just get in and let them explain it. Oh, have you always been a diehard whatever?
Yeah.
And then let them explain it. One time I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, teaching a leadership program, walked out in the muggiest place I've ever been in my life. I live in a desert in Salt Lake City, outside of Salt Lake City. And I'm used to arid desert. I walk out, muggiest place ever, and I'm like, oh, this place is so muggy. And the guy behind me is like, this is nothing. Try Vietnam. And I'm like, what? I'm good. I'm good. All he had to do to validate me was get curious. Now, so are you not from here? No. Where are you from? Well, I'm from Utah. Oh, isn't that a desert? Yeah. Now he knows why I'm dying.
Right.
So I can be valid and he can be valid. And then he can say, guess what kills a Biloxi boy? What? Vietnam. Now I'm curious. Tell me about Vietnam. Were you there? Is it worse than this? Oh, yeah, it's horrible. And now we can both be valid. That's all people want, is one more step of curiosity towards you. E stands for encouragement. Long-term relationships require that we encourage one another, that you keep the dream alive. Encourage simply means that you get. Courage comes from the Latin word for heart, cor, and the French word cœur, which means heart. To encourage somebody means you get within their heart. And last but not least is dedication. If you want people around for a long time, they've got to know that you're more dedicated to them than any other person, place, or thing. When you're talking to your client, don't stop and talk to another client. Period. Send them upstairs. Hey, go check upstairs. There is the really nicest buffet table you'll ever see up there. Go check that out. And I'll let you guys have a little time to wander upstairs, and then go take your call. And then don't take it long, and then come back out, and you know the game. So those are what we call the 7 basic need. We call it the starved stuff. Basic rule is simply starved people starve people. And so what I want you to start to do is listen to what they're arguing, what they're saying, what they're focused on. And I want you to start seeing if you can't cut down from the smoke. It's not about the carpets. It sounds like you're afraid that the carpets are too dingy. Yeah, they'll probably have mold in them. Oh, so they're dingy and unsafe. And then you just get to the safe issue. Wouldn't this be a great place to have your coffee? Oh my gosh, just looking at that stream and those trees. Yeah, this is incredible. Do you feel peace here, Stacy? Yeah. Now guess what? Now you're validating what she brought up earlier. You're encouraging her. And when you say stuff like that, you're showing that you paid attention. So those are the 7 basic needs. And I would just challenge everybody as you're kind of going through this stuff. Notice the smoke, notice it. It's fine. Just don't react to it. Notice it. The minute you go through and think of this as a process, notice the smoke, right? I call it recognize the emotion, and then explore the story behind the emotion. As you explore the story behind the emotion, attend to where they're starving. And when you attend to the starving, it means you actually hear it's a safety issue, and then pay attention to that issue for them. And what you'll start to do is turn off their fight or flight. By the way, I did a TED talk. If you just Google Matt Townsend and TEDx, I did about a 15-minute talk on the process of recognizing emotion, exploring the story, attending, and lifting. And you guys could go watch that, show it to your team, talk about it. And then to me, until you've turned off or met these needs, it matters not what else you're doing. Right. And once you can actually get down to the starve stuff, Stephen Covey used to say, you're in sacred ground. Now you're in their heart. So you have to be vigilant in that space to not ever use that against them. Right. Because you don't want that they opened up their heart to you to then lead to you being able to hurt them again.
Right.
And that's not always up to you to decide, because they may choose to think that you're always hurting them. But this is how I think that we cut through it all and get down to the starve stuff and start, man, what would it be like in this world if we could all just feed one starved need of one person every day?
Those micro moments. Isn't
that cool? Yeah, exactly. Money, man, that's power.
It is. And, we talk and talk about, value creation. And one of the things I think everybody truly wants in their business is, create more value, help people achieve and solve their challenges, overcome those obstacles. And, this to me is one of the greatest processes to be able to achieve that. Right.
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's where, the monetary, exchange happens. But that's just, to me, the financial reward is just a byproduct of the thing that's more important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you think about it, in fact, there's a great quote. Let me get it here. In the end, and this right when you were saying that, I'm thinking, I don't know if you've ever heard of Tim Keller. I bet I've told you this quote before. Tim Keller is he's a pastor of, I think he's a Protestant pastor or something, but he, well, let me try to find it to know. But he just passed away. And I just sit there and I think, if you've had another sell and you've made a lot of money in your real estate business, I mean, I guess that's awesome. That's great. But in the end, there's this quote that is, I think, what we all really are striving for in life. He says, to be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. So to just have someone love you but not know what your starved issues are, it's comforting, but it's kind of superficial. And then he says, to be known, to know my starved stuff and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It's what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense. It humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and it fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. So this process of micro moments, of intangibles, of getting through the smoke to the starved issues, it will generate cells because it'll create emergent properties. But most importantly, what it'll do is it'll let the person you're talking to know two things: that you know them deeply, and that you're willing to love them and serve that need to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
And which is such a basic thing we need. And it turns off every other silly little game that we're playing with each other, which will create so much more efficiency in your game, in your job, in your life. You won't have to dance about the stupid stuff anymore. Power.
So powerful. Matt, you're amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time, pouring into every one of us. Tons of notes again.
You bet. Me too. I love you guys. This is awesome.
You're great. Matt, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Catch you guys on the next show. See ya.
See you guys.